Hello and a warm welcome to Market Views. Here we deep dive into the topical issues revolving around our local capital markets. We unpack the financial statements published by the listed counters either on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange or Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. We also have a wide view of the cautionary announcements also issued by listed counters on the either on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange or the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. Yeah, and today we want to delve into the half-year financials of Delta Corporation and its subsidiary, AFDIS, African Distilleries. And joining me on set today to delve into the financials is Tapiwa Nashe, a financial analyst from KEBS. Tapiwa, welcome to the set.
Thank you, Kuda.
Yeah, but as you know, before we deep dive into it, let's just have a refresher of how our markets performed over the week ending 14 November 2020. Well, we've seen Zimbabwe Stock Exchange and the whole boss has lost about 4% over the week, represented by the all-share index, as you can see there. But well, surprisingly, the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange started to pick up, as you can see, also gaining by almost the similar margin there. That's 3.8%. And yeah, there we can see Delta and Econet, those continue to interplay interchangeably in terms of the market activity. Yeah, and what's mostly interesting there, topical counters to look at is which have remained on the top 5 major gainers this weekend. They were also part of major gainers last week, and Econet right there worryingly remaining in the top 5 losers over the week. And on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, we have seen Padenga right recording some quite in terms of activity there, as we have seen the holdings are reporting a 9-month trading update whereby 22% of gold sales rise we've been witnessed compared to last year, right? As we have seen that Padenga has got 2 structures. That's the Dalagio investment as well as the agribusiness. And now the mining segment is contributing 88% to the top line of Padenga. And also Westprop, which have also sold off the Pokugara estates. We've also seen it recording quite some activity there, because the counter doesn't normally register much activity, right? Then yeah, there we can see it's interesting. Like I've said, we are looking at Delta, which is the largest and the oldest counter listed on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. So now let's look into these financials. Tapiwa, we've seen the beverages giant, right, reported 11% increase in terms of its revenue. And yeah, maybe just breaking it down for those people who might want to understand more about it. We know that on the top line of Delta, this is issues to do with the lager beverages, the sorghum, beer, as well as the sparkling beverages, right? And what I've just seen when I looked at the numbers, I saw that it was what mainly contributed towards the half-year top line. It was the sparkling drinks, right? And also the lager beer. But the sorghum beer, in terms of the volume, it actually slammed by, I think, 12%. Yeah, so let's pick the top line of beverages, yeah, I mean, to our investors and even other laymen, people who doesn't even understand about Delta. What do you think you can share about it?
Thank you, Kuda. First of all, I would like to appreciate the effort which was put by the management of Delta to have such an increase in revenue. But first of all, I want to give an overview of how macroeconomic issues affecting the operation of Delta Beverages, which spans to that small increase in revenue. Yes, it's an increase, it's a plus, but I'm not that convinced given the potential with Delta. If we look into natural disaster, which is El Nino induced drought, it impacted the cost in the factors of production, mainly on inputs, just like sorghum, as you mentioned,
that segment,
and maize, where we get maize. Drought induced, the El Nino induced drought impacted the availability of inputs, which is used for production to produce beer, as we all know. Sure. But the unavailability of enough rain during the past year impacted the supply of sorghum, which means we had a scarcity in the supply of the required input. Those issues to do with the scarcity of input causes the prices of those input to rise. Sure. Which later impacts the cost of production. That's the reason why if you check on the cost of production or operating cost, you see which is induced by the shortage of raw materials in the production process. If you look into the other impact brought by El Nino, you see the issues to do with the shortage of energy. Is the majority mentioned that there is no enough water in Kariba Dam to generate enough electricity, which led to an increase in the cost of production through the disruption which were brought by the lack of a power supply. So the corporate in question was forced to use a lot of energy in the form of fuel. And fuel impacted the cost of production, which later increases the cost of operation, which reduces the revenue, and impacted the revenue which were supposed to be realized by Delta. Wow. So we have also the issue to do with the hyperinflation. There is a transmission effect from the issue of inflation, the cost of inflation to the cost of price of the factors of production.
Sure. If I get you correctly, you're speaking about the issue to do with, we've seen that, it's a half-year financials ending in September.
Yes.
And actually, the beginning of the half-year, that's April, which was the same period, that the new currency was issued out. Yes. And we've also seen in terms of the USD contribution towards the top line actually declining. Yes. Because I'm sure some of the products, they were now being channeled towards the formal channel, where some of the products were priced in ZiG. Yes. That's aspect of, is that, if I get it correctly, what you're trying to say?
True.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, and we've also seen, right, the operating expenses, like you have said, you have alluded to, actually increasing by 17%. Yeah. But just to add on some of what you have said, I've also seen that another topical thing that we can share with our viewers, I think it would be remiss not to talk about it, is that aspect of Syntex. I've also seen that it affected the group quite heavily, because I think for that half-year period, they paid, I think, more than 20 million in terms of Syntex. And as we ordinarily see, this is just the cost being passed on to the consumers, and also in turn it will lead towards the volume reduction. So wow, that's interesting. Now let's talk about the bottom line. In as much as we've seen the group incurring all these headwinds, we've seen the bottom line increasing by 85% due to a decline in the net exchange losses, in monetary adjustments by 75%. Well, in turn, the earnings per share, the diluted earnings per share, actually increasing by over 100%. And recently, we've seen the group declaring a dividend of 1 cent per share. Right, this is sort of like creating shareholder value to shareholders. But look, currently Delta price is at 50 cents.
Yeah, true.
And we've seen that, I think not only even far away, in the first half of this year, 2024, at some point the price actually reached $10, $15. Let's talk about that. What's your thoughts when you're looking at the Delta price? Do you think the market is, the share price on the market currently is reflecting the true value of the fundamental of the business, or it's just the issue to do with liquidity?
Thank you, Kuda.
Yeah.
I do believe I want to first look at the bottom line of Delta.
Yeah.
We witnessed an 85% increase in profit for the period,
Sure.
which mainly emanating from the reduction in net exchange loss.
Sure.
So it's quite a big number, 85%, and it's very difficult to validate that given the issues with accounting reporting standard change, where they were changed from reporting in Zimbabwean dollar to US dollar. There is a lot of distortion in terms of accounting numbers, though the management declared that those numbers are mathematically accurate. If we see the bigger effect in the last year's profit for the period emanating from the issue of net exchange loss, which is not a monetary issue, and they were using some estimates. So to accurately declare the comparability of 85% increase in
the top line, in the bottom line,
in the bottom line is quite difficult, but I am sure the numbers are up there, but not is that much.
Okay.
If we remove the issue to do with account
conversion,
reporting, that's according to IAS 21, according to management notes in their financial statement. But I believe all shares, including the shares of Deltas, they are quite underpriced. They are not reflecting the true value of all the information or the fundamental factors which we believe are impacting the position of the value of the shares of Delta. So I do believe there is a sort of undervaluation on those stocks that are not reflecting full information. Maybe it's because we are in the weak form market.
Yeah, I do agree with you, because I've also realized that the way the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange market ordinarily works, it's got a lot to do with liquidity.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, so we have got even some clients holding on to their shares, even those ones who wants to dispose of. But okay, and also just another metric that can also allude to this. I think 2 weeks ago, the total weekly value traded was over 200 million ZiG. Last week it was around 79 million ZiG, and this week alone it was 49 million ZiG. You see that downtrend there. Yeah, so true. Yeah, it's an issue to do with liquidity as much. So I do agree with you that the current price doesn't reflect the true fundamental aspects of Delta. Now
just to add on the bottom line, sure, factor mainly on earnings per share. Yeah. If you see correctly on their financials, you see the issue to do with the litigation issues, yeah, which means they are factoring in some tax expenses is required by Zimura based on pay now and argue later principle, which means they are paying a certain amount of tax, which reduces the amount of profit which is supposed to be entitled to shareholders. So if the court's hearing will come in favor of Delta, we have a opportunity to realize an increase in terms of earnings per share or earnings, because those funds which are paid now based on the principle adopted by SIMRA will be refunded back to Delta, because according to their statements, based on the management's notes, you see they were able to pay something like around 8.5 million, and they are trying to pay something like around 54 million based on those tax issues. If they are going to win that case and get those funds back, those funds will have a material effect on the bottom line of Delta and will affect the shareholders' wealth in a positive direction.
Understood. Now let's delve into African distillers. It's an interesting counter for me personally, because I think in my first week as an analyst, this was the counter that I covered firstly, and it was now interesting later, obviously, when I realized that it's a subsidiary of Delta. So yeah, it's listed separately on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, and they also published their half-year financials for the same period as of Delta. We have also seen, the top line revenue for African distilleries increasing by 7%, primarily due to new product launches, an issue to do with the distribution network, and promotions also, meaning these are discounts on some of the products. As we have seen, they have intense competition on cheaper and illicit spirits, right? Let's talk about let's unpack the top line of AFDIS.
Thank you, Kuda. I concur with you. There is a positive increase in revenue, which is quite a good thing to us analysts and investors there.
Sure.
And but I'm sure there is a big potential on this company to realize a better revenue as compared to what we have right now. If we have a conducive environment. Because if the
government is able, maybe possibly, to deal with those cheaper illicit spirits.
Exactly, because if you see the impact of police as a risk, you see the impact of tax, the sugar tax component. That component impacted the production of the product we have for these companies, including Delta. So if you also look into the issues of inflation and the effect of inflation in the production cycle of this beer, you realize that if the economy or the government tries to manage and to contain inflation, maybe through regularization of ZiG and the exchange rate, some sort of or have a potential to realize a better revenue for these companies, including Delta, which is a good thing for this company. Because we have a lot of potential in this sector. We have a lot of future on these sectors. If you right now, I project an increase in revenue in the second half of this year, mainly during this upcoming holiday, because the uptake of the clear beer beverage will be very high as usual, and I'm sure through the issuance of bonuses to civil servants and other private workers will trigger the disposable income for consumer to consume a lot of beer during the holiday time, and that will affect the top line of the AFDIS. that's my prediction, and I strongly argue with you that the revenue for this company will be better than the first half of the year.
Yeah, that's interesting. There you have it. Yeah, I'm sure if he shared his own views and I've shared my own views, because yeah, I don't believe a surge in revenue, primarily with use of promotions is sustainable in the long run. So yeah, let's maybe conclude by looking at the bottom line. We've also seen the bottom line now of AFTIS actually tapering off by 37%, right, from 4 million to around 2.5 million, right? Let's look at that, an issue to do with maybe an increase in the expenses, operating expenses, and everything. What's your view? What's your analyst commentary on that?
It's quite worrisome to have such a decline in terms of profit for the period. But what I have noticed is that AFTIS recently acquired a lot of debt. If you go and check on their balance sheet, or even their profit and loss, you see an increase in terms of interest expense, which is one of the factors which impacted heavily their profit for the period, which is net profit. So I'm really worried about their gearing ratio, but I am sure it's quite manageable if they try to play around that line. If they try to minimize their debt finance or their leverage ratio, I see a potential of an increase in terms of their net profits as well as their return earning per share. Though currently it's heavily impacted with those issues to do with the debt finance
costs.
So if they try to increase their working capital through maybe cash balances by trying to sell their
internally generated funds,
exactly, that will be an advantage in terms of their bottom line, as they are going to report their end of year financials. So we are waiting to see what's going on
play out in this second half of the year.
Yes.
Well, interesting. There you have it, dear viewers. It's quite a pleasure having you joining us as we deep dive into these financials. Yeah, be sure to join us, another time. But yeah, once again, Tapiwa, it's been an interesting discussion, actually. I hope you enjoyed as much. Thank you so much for being with us today, and we look forward to having you, in the coming sessions.
Yeah,
and viewers, thank you. Continue to view, continue to like, to subscribe, and to comment down below. Thank you. Have a good day for the rest of your time.
Thank you.